Hey, what's on, guys? Welcome back to another tutorial. Now this is going to be an HTML complete tutorial. This is a tutorial that's designed to take you from beginner to professional. Throughout this tutorial, we're going to look at various sections, and the first section is to understand what HTML is. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It is the standard markup language used to structure content on web pages. It tells the browser what different pieces of content are in the page. For example, the headings, the paragraphs, images, links, lists, tables, forms, and videos. There's always the structure of an HTML, and it's not something you are able to see. What you usually see is the overall response from the browser. So there's always a code that structures everything on the web page, including things like maybe the links, the logo, the headings, the paragraphs, and even the contact forms. There are basically three technologies that are used to build every given website, and that is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML basically provides the structure and meaning of the content. For example, you can have a heading, you can have a paragraph, and you can have an image inserted in a web page. So that one is usually achieved by the use of HTML. CSS, on the other hand, is usually used to control how the content looks, and it's basically used to style the web page. So for example, we can give a heading a color, we can change the font type, and we can even increase maybe the font size. JavaScript is used to enhance interactivity. It allows our website to be dynamic. For example, we can click maybe a button and we get a response, maybe a color change, or maybe a form validation on the front end. So together, the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, they help in building interactive website because the three always work together. Throughout this tutorial, we're going to build a simple structured website, although the website is not going to be fancy because we're not going to use the CSS and the JavaScript, but we're just going to group all these contents together so that you can understand HTML. So the project is going to consist of multiple pages. We'll have the navigation menu, course catalog, tables and shadows, blog section, videos and media, contact form, and registration forms. The project is going to be a structure such that after every section, we are going to build part of the project. The course is designed in such a way that we are going to understand the HTML fundamentals, then we'll move to text and content. We'll also look at images and links, then we'll move to list, table, and tables. We'll dive into multimedia, we'll understand forms and form elements. We look at the semantic elements, metadata, and the SEO, accessibility best practices, and lastly, we'll have our full website. Alright, for us to get started, we need to set up our workspace, and the first thing we're going to need is going to be a working code editor and a browser. So the recommended code editor that we're going to use is going to be the VS Code. That's the Visual Studio Code. We're going to head over to VS Studio Code website to download the VS Code Studio. So we're going to use our browser. Of course, I'm using Google Chrome. On Google Chrome, we're going to search VS Code and then click on the first link from the search result. Now we are going to be taken to the official Visual Studio website, the code visualstudio.com. Depending with the type of machine or the type of OS that you're using, you're going to be presented with a download button. Of course, I'm running Windows on my local machine. So we're supposed to, if you're running Windows, we're supposed to download for Windows using this button. So we're going to click on the button, and then the download is going to be triggered shortly. So we're going to wait for the download to complete, and then thereafter we are going to move ahead and run the installation. Alright, so we have the VS Code installed on our PC, and so we are going to launch the VS Code and do a little customization so that we can get our workspace set up and ready to learn HTML. To launch the VS Code, we are going to double click on the icon, and then the VS Code is going to be launched automatically. For the first time, if you have the VS Code Studio installed, we're going to be prompted with some updates on release version and maybe some changes. Already, I've gone through that, and then you are going to have this welcome notification. So within the welcome notification, there are a few things you can do here, but we're going to close that. Now, what I recommend before we get started is to install some extensions. So we're going to head over to the activity panel or bar, and then we're going to click on the extension icon. I basically recommend that you install 3 extensions, and that is you install the live server, material icon theme, and the prettier code. So once all these ones are installed, then we can get ahead and start learning HTML. So we need to go ahead and create our project folder so that we can start learning HTML. Now to create project folder, we're going to head over to the file tab, and then we're going to go to open folder. So we're going to navigate to a convenient directory. Of course, I'm going to use the desktop, and then within desktop, we're going to create a folder. So I'll call the folder my website. Then we're going to open the folder in VS Code. So my website is going to be our project folder. Within my website, we're going to have all the files that we're going to work with in this tutorial. So one of the first files that we're going to work with is going to be the official landing page of any given HTML website, and it is the home page. So the home page has a special name, and the name is usually index.html. So we're going to call the page index.html. Now any given website file or page usually ends with the extension .html because it denotes that we've used HTML to structure the page. Now I'm going to paste a boilerplate code here. There's a template for HTML for any given website, and you don't need to worry about the code because in a short while I'm going to explain whatever all this one means. Now what we can do here, within the title tags, we can just have the name of our website, and that's going to be the Learn Academy. So we'll type in the Learn Academy between the opening tag and the closing tag, and then we can go ahead and save everything by hitting the Control S on our keyboard. So I want us to preview whatever we have here. Let me just open the live server. So we're going to use the live server to preview everything we have here. So to open the live server, it's super simple. We can use the go live button on the notification bar down here, or we can just right click the code within our code, and then we go to open with the live server. So either it's supposed to automatically launch the live server, and what we're going to do here, we're going to tag VS Code side by side to the browser so that we can see everything, every change that we make here, we can see it here right away on the fly. So just to start with, you can see that on the tab here of the browser, we have the name of the website, and we've called it the Learn Academy. So that is the name that we have between the opening title tag and the closing title tag. So this is going to be the boilerplate that we're going to use throughout this tutorial, so that we can build our website in parts as the tutorial unfolds. Now just take note that for any given website, or for any given, should I say, HTML file, any page will automatically end with the .html extension, because it denotes that the page is written in HTML to structure the page. We can also have .php when we are going to run PHP files or PHP calls in the HTML. So in our next section of the tutorial, we are going to learn all these things. What do they mean? And that is under elements, tags, and attributes. It is now a good time for us to understand the structure of any given HTML file or HTML document. Now, in any given HTML document, we have a structure that we are supposed to follow. Now, first we have the exclamation doc type HTML. Now, this one shows that we are using the current HTML version, and that is HTML version 5. Then we have the HTML lang is equal to English, and that is it denotes that our page is encoded in English version, the language that we're using. Then within the head section, this is where we are going to have the meta tag, and then we link our HTML to other resources. We'll look at that later. What I want us to understand is that the title is where we have the heading of the name of the website that appears on the tab of the browser. Then we have the body. So within the body here, this is where we have everything that is displayed within the browser window. So everything that we want to get displayed in the browser window, we type it within the body here. So you need to understand that any given HTML, should I say, the element is made up of the opening and the closing tags. So these are what we call the tags. So we have a tag, which is an opening tag, and then we have a closing tag that starts with a forward slash, then the tag name. So we also use the angle brackets, and it is important that every tag be closed. Now you also need to understand that we have self-closing tags. We have tags that doesn't need a closing tag, for example the image, the break, and so forth. We look at that later. Now Another thing that you need to understand is that an element is made up of the tag, and then we have the text in between the tags, and then the closing tag. So we can have another tag. Maybe we have a tag like maybe a div. So we'll open the left bracket, type div, then we close, and then VS Code has the ability to close that automatically, and that is because of the feature known as the emit feature of VS Code. So I have a video that is specific for early, made on how to use and customize VS Code. You can go ahead and check the video from my dashboard, and then you can watch the video. Within the opening and the closing tag, we can have something like maybe we can just do maybe a name, like we can say my website. So when you type my website and this element resides within the opening and the closing body, that is what we're supposed to preview here. So you can see that when the change that I've done on the VS Code is saved, then automatically we are able to preview it here, and that is because of the live server extension. We also need to understand that we can have other additional information within the opening tag of any given element, and they're always known as the attribute. So elements can come with what we call the attribute, and attribute usually come in what we call a name value pair. For example, we can have an attribute of class, an attribute of ID, and so forth. So maybe for the div, we can give it a class, so we can type a class, and then we can maybe call it the heading, or we can call it the name, we can call it the brand name of the website, and so forth. So elements have what we call the attribute, and attribute is usually placed within the opening tag of an element. So the attribute come in a name value pair. So we have the name, the equal sign, and then we have the value in double quotations. So in the next section, we're supposed to start building our project step by step, and we'll be looking at the heading and the paragraphs. Now, we need to understand that every HTML page is structured using headings and paragraphs. Now, headings and paragraphs gives a clear outlay of content in a web page. And in this section, we're going to use heading and paragraphs to start building our project. Now, heading ranges from H1 through H6, with H1 being the smallest the largest heading, which is very conspicuous, and H6 being the smallest heading. So it depends with what you want to label. If it's something very important, then I feel H1 is more appropriate, rather ideal. Then paragraphs are the same. We just have the paragraphs, and they're the same because they sort of represent maybe a tagline or maybe an explanation of a heading. So it is very important that you start with a heading and then you go to a paragraph. So headings have the closing tags. So we're going to use headings to start building the project right away. So we'll have heading 1, and because of the emit feature, I don't have to type the opening and the closing right angle brackets. I just type H1, hit tab on the keyboard, and then the emit feature is going to do the magic by closing the tags. Now we're going to give some text in between the opening and the closing tags, and we'll type something like learn digital skills, build your future, build your future, build your future. And then we'll move to the next line. So there's a keyboard shortcut from VS Code, that is Control Enter, that automatically takes you to the next line. And then we can do maybe head 2. We can have head 2, heading 2, and then the heading 2 will be our popular courses. So we'll have something like our popular courses. And then we can also do something like maybe a paragraph. The paragraph can be something like maybe learn with us. So we can have a paragraph, and then we'll say learn. Okay, let's do a lorem. Let's just do some dummy text. So we can do a lorem 20. That is going to give us some dummy text. So that is a shortcut used in VS Code. So you can preview right away on our window of the browser using the live server extension. So this is what we've had. We have the heading, we have this heading 1, and then we have the H2 heading, and then we have the paragraph. So we can go to the dev tools within the browser and see if what we have here is what is behind the scene on the browser. So to access the dev tool, we're just going to right click, and then we move to inspect, and then from there we can see everything. So just like we have our code here, it's the same way we have the code here. This section is the same. say there's a code injected by live server, and that is a script. You don't need to worry about this one. This is a JavaScript, JavaScript code that is added by the server, so you don't need to worry about that. So we've just built the first section of the website, and in the next lesson we'll look at text formatting. HTML gives us the ability to format text into various, should I say, styles. But I recommend that when you want to do serious styling, use an external style sheet, and that is the CSS or either the Bootstrap framework. So we can use tags such as the strong, the bold, the M, the italics, the break to do basic formatting. So I want us to see this one in action. So the first one is the strong. So we can just do a strong, and then we are going to nest in maybe a word like maybe a website. So when you nest website, let's do strong, and then we add in a website. Let's do a website, and then when we save, you see that we have the website, but it's supposed to be bold. Now let me just hide these ones. Let me just hide these ones, and then you can see that the website is bold. Now whatever I've done there is just what we call commenting out. We look at that later. We also have another formatting tag that is a bold, so we can do a bold, and then we can have a website that is still going to be bold. So we have another website, it's going to be bold. Now that's they're sitting side by side because there's what you call a block level element and inline element. So these are basically categorized as inline elements because they sit side by side. So we can do a break. We can break that space so that we have each one on its line. Then we can also do an M. So we also have an M. So let me just eliminate that space. So we can do an M. We can have M emphasis, and then we can do website. When we say that, we also have the title website, which appears to be italics. Let me just do a break of space there, and then we can also have another formatting, and that will be italics. So I'll do I, and then I'll do website. So you'll find that this one is also going to appear as italics, and there it is. So let me just break line there, and then we'll have it on this new line. We also have some other, like maybe we can have the HR horizontal line. So we can do a horizontal line HR, and that is going to give us a horizontal line on a page. We can also have a mark, so we can do a mark, and then we can say something like website, and then we are going to highlight, and then we can also do the small. So we also have a small tag. So the small is going to reduce the size of the text to a small, should I say, small font, that is. So I want us to use the strong the strong tag so that we can make our heading to look a bit fancy. So maybe before the courses, I'll open a tag, then I'll type strong. Let's do strong, and then we'll cut the courses, and then we'll insert it in between the opening and the closing strong tag. So when you save that one, this one is supposed to appear to be bold, but it's not going to appear because already H2 appears to be bold. So maybe we can do emphasis, so we can do M, we can do M, and then we change also this one to be M, so that we can have we can have a distinction. That is the basic formatting that we can achieve using HTML. If you want to do a serious formatting or styling, then I advise that you use an external styling sheet, and that is the CSS. HTML gives us the ability to add images on our web page. So to add images, we'll be using the image tag, which comes with some attributes in it. So I want us to see this one in action. We're going to add some images below the paragraph, the Lorem paragraph we have. And before we get that in action, first we need to ensure that we have our images within our project folder. So within the project folder, I'm going to create another folder, and then I'll call it images. Already I've created one, so let me just delete it, so that you can go ahead and create another one. So to create it within, first we ensure that we're within our website project folder, and then we click the new folder icon. So we'll call it the images. and then we hit enter. So I have images in my local machine. I'm going to drag them and drop them within that images folder that we just created. To add these images, we can go ahead and use the image tag. So the image tag is basically img, and it's an inline tag. So we expect the images to be stacked side by side. Now it comes with the two attributes, the source attribute, which is basically going to allow us to select the location of where we have the images. And then we also have the alt attribute. The alt attribute is used in the absence, or maybe when the link to the source of the image is broken. So it shows, or rather it displays what the image is all about. So let's just rename the images. So we can rename them. We can give them image names such as the CSS. And then we can also rename these ones. So let's just preview and then rename. So this is going to be JS. So let's name it JS. And then the other one, I believe, is HTML. So just rename it HTML. Back to our index.html, there's another attribute that is the width or the height. So this one works on the size of the image, because sometimes our image might happen to occupy the entire page, and we'd want to size it so that it can be in a manageable size. There are two types of linking. We have what we call the absolute link and relative link. So when you link anything relative to the page, then you talk about relative linking. But when you link to another source or another website, then you talk about absolute linking. So relative linking is preferred compared to absolute linking, because it ensures that the link doesn't get broken, or maybe when you switch on hosting, everything remains intact. So we're going to add the link, and to add the link to our first image, I want the first image with the CSS file. So the CSS file is on the root. So to access the root, we'll just do // and then we go to the images folder, hit tab, and then we can select the first image, and that is the CSS. So when you Control S, you can see that already on our website we have the CSS, and the image is so big, and that is why we are going to introduce the width attribute. So on the alt, we can call it the CSS, and then we just save that. And then we can have the width attribute, and then we can give it a width in pixels, and that can be something like maybe let me have maybe 50, and then we save. So let me just zoom out, because I zoomed in so that we can see the size of the image. Now let's also proceed and add another image. So we'll have the image tag. And then the source is on the root folder. So we do a // and then we access the images folder, and then we'll go and hit enter the HTML. So that one gives us HTML, and then the alt attribute, we'll call it HTML. Let's call it HTML, and then we'll add the width attribute for the size, and then we can equally make it to be 50, so that we can have everything visible within our page. We can just adjust this a bit. Let's do 100, and then we see what we get. So let's have it as 100, and then we see. I think that is my deal. The last image is going to be the JS image. So we just go to the root folder, images, and then we select the JS image. Then on the alt, we'll have maybe we call it the JS, and then we will have a width. We can do a width the same of 100 pixels, so that we can have it visible. So you can see, I think the images were not in uniform size, but I'll just leave them in that. Or maybe we can just play around and see. Maybe we can have this one as 50, and then we can also, let me just adjust this to around 80 pixels. And then we can do this still so big. Let me just adjust this space so you can see. The actual size. So let me have it as 70. Let's do 70. Let's do 70. 70, and then you can adjust this one to around 110, and then we see what we have. And then 110, that's too big. Maybe we can do 105. Okay, and then you can do this one. You can just leave that one as 100. Now, what maybe we can play around with is that we can change the locations of these images, and then you can see how it's going to appear. So I'm going to take out the CSS image. Let me just move it out, and then you can see that now we are having the alt text being displayed as the text holder for the image. So it shows that we had a CSS image somewhere there. Let me just take it back into that folder, and then we can have everything back the way it was. So that is about images. So we can do a lot with images using the CSS. We can style them, we can do we can stretch them, and so forth. So I want us to move to the next section of the lesson, and that is going to be links and URLs. HTML provides us with the ability to link to various resources or other web pages. So to link to various resources or web pages, we're going to use the anchor tag, which is a linking feature of HTML. So assuming that maybe we have some other pages within the web page, so to navigate to those pages, we're going to link them. There are two types of linking. There is absolute linking and the relative linking. Now, relative linking is a linking that is done when you link to other files within the page or other landing pages. And then relative linking is a complete link to a different resource, should I say, location. It gives a complete URL of a website or of a resource material. What we're going to do in this section, we are going to create other pages. The first page that we have was an index.html. So we're going to create another page within my website. So first we ensure that we are on my website, and then you are going to click create another file. So we're going to have contact. We'll have contact.html for the contact form, and then we'll also have another file, and that is going to be a blog. So we can have blog. So let's do blog.html for the blog post, and then we'll also have another one, and this one will be about for the about sections. We'll have about HTML. That is going to give us about information on the website. We can also add another one for registration.html. Currently the pages are empty, so we need to generate some HTML code. So let's just do something very fast. On the contact.html, we just generate the boilerplate, and then we'll give it a h1, and then within the h1 we will call it maybe contact us. Let's just call it contact us as the heading, so we'll call it contact us. And then on the blog, we'll call it blog page. So let's do generate a boilerplate, and then we will call it our blog. So let's call it blog. Then on the about, we will have the about us. So let's do a h1 of about us. And then lastly, registration, we will say registration. So we will go ahead and say h1 registration, because this is going to be the registration page of the website. Now we need to link these websites. So on our index.html, we can have some link that takes us to these sections of the pages, or rather these external pages. Let's do a link. So we'll have a home. So to link, we're going to use the anchor tag. So just hit A on the keyboard and then hit tab. It comes with the first attribute, which is the href. So the href is the specific location of the page or maybe of the resource. So these pages, they are on the same root folder as the index.html. So we can just have a root, and then we can give it the first link. So we can have maybe let's have the first the first one is going to be a home page. So we link it to the index.html, and then the link text should be home. So you can see that on top here we have home, and this takes us to the same page. Then we can have another one, and that one is going to take us maybe to the blog. So we can, before we go to the blog, maybe we can have the contact, and then we'll give it the contact text. Now I want us to duplicate these links, keyboard shortcut, duplicate them. So we can do 3. So what I'm going to do, we're going to hold down the Alt, Shift, and then the down arrow to duplicate. So 1, 2, and then 3. We're going to change the href. For this one, we're going to have about, and then we will change the link text to be about. So we'll have about, and then for the next one, we will change the contact to be blog. So we'll have blog.html, blog.html, and then the link text is supposed to be so we'll have it blog. And then lastly, we'll change this one to be the registration. So we'll have it as registration, and then the link text will be registration. So when you save everything, we have all our three links above here. So the home page takes you to the index page. Of course, not going to reload because that's where we have. And then the contact page will take you to the contact us. And then the about us take you to the about us page, the blog to blog page, and then the registration to the registration page. We've linked them, and I've said that when you link, you use the anchor tag, which comes with the first attribute, that is the href. The href specify the location of the resource or of the page. The next tag that you can have is the target attribute. So the target comes with various values with the blank, the parent, self, top. So these ones basically commands the link on how it's going to be open. So in talk of the blank, when we give the value of the blank, then when you click on it to open that page or that link, it's going to open on a new blank tab. But default this is always on the parent. We can also have a value of parent, and the parent means that it opens on the same window, on the same. It doesn't open another tab. We also have some other values that you can look at. We can talk of the self. You can also have the self. So the self is the same, and then you can also have the top. You can also give the target of top, which opens is on the top of the window. So those are the values of the target attribute. You can have them as either parent, or you can have them as blank to open blank page. So the default value is parent. If you don't supply them, then automatically they're going to open on the same page. That is, you can also link within our page. So assuming that maybe our page has grown so long, that is the home page. So let me just have maybe some section. I want to let me have this paragraph. So when you duplicate it, the page becomes a bit longer. Now we can link to maybe some section, maybe for these this section of the images. So let's have the sections. So I'll wrap them in another should I say tag, which is a container, and that is a div tag. So we can just have div container, then I'll have everything wrapped inside there. So let me just Control X and then have them wrapped inside there. We are going to give this div of class container an ID. So you can give it an ID of courses. Can give it an ID of courses, and then we want to link to that section. So we can go to our links here, and then we can add another link. We'll give it a href that matches the ID here. So the ID that we have is courses. So we'll do a linking, internal linking, and to link that we're going to start with the hash symbol and then courses. Then when you click on it, now it's supposed to take us directly to the courses section, which are these images. So let's just click on it, and then it's supposed to redirect, supposed to scroll. Maybe our text still not enough. Let me just add this text once more, and then when you click on courses, you're supposed to scroll. Something's not working well. Courses, let me see the ID. ID is courses, so it is case sensitive. Let's just give it the small c, and then let's scroll. Good, so it's working. So it's not fancy because you're not using the CSS to make it scroll progressively. So that is how we link within the page. We use the ID, and then we'll have that ID in href starting with the hashtag. So I want us to move to the next section, and that is going to be HTML list. HTML gives us the ability to add a list of items in our web page. So maybe you have a list of some items that you want to include. We can do them using the HTML listing element. So let's see that one in action. Now, there are three types of list. We have what we call the ordered list, the unordered list, and what we call the description list. So we're going to start by looking at the ordered list, and to do ordered list of items, we are going to use the OL tag. So we'll have the OL tag for ordered list, and then we are going to have individual list items using the LI tag. So the LI tag can take we can have an HTML as maybe the first LI tag, and then we are going to duplicate this line so that we can have other list items like maybe the CSS, and then you can also have the JavaScript as another list item. So when you save everything and then we go to our page, let me just comment this lorem stuff. Let me just comment it out. So you see that we have our list here. That is the ordered list. Now ordered list comes with two main attributes. The first attribute is a type attribute, and from the type you can either choose to be either the numericals, which is the default, or you can have the capital alphabet, the small alphabet, capital Romans, or the small Romans. So let me just have maybe the small Romans. Let me select the small Romans, and then when you save everything, it changes to the small Romans. Now we can also have another attribute of the ordered list, and that is the start attribute. The start attribute simply tells the list from where to start, that is. So we can maybe say start from 2, and then it's going to start from Roman 2, and everything is going to change. We can now maybe start from 10, and then it's going to start from Roman 10. Now we also have another type of list, and that is going to be the unordered list. So unordered list we achieve by using the UL tag, and then within the UL tag we're going to have the individual list items using the LI tag. So we can have the same items. We can have HTML, and then we're going to duplicate this line of code so that we have CSS and also the JavaScript as another list item. So let's just type the JavaScript as another list item, and then when we save, the items are using the bullet. Now we also have another type of listing, and that is going to be the description list. So we achieve description list using the DL, and then within the description list view we can have description tab, that is the DT. So maybe we can talk of front end, and then next we are going to have the description of description, that is for individual items. So we can have the HTML, and then we can duplicate that line so that we can have the CSS, and then we can also have the JavaScript as another list items, that is. So that is about listing. So I want us to use this concept of listing so that we can structure our navigation links. Listing is usually very important when it comes to modern HTML web pages. It is a concept that is basically used in the nav to structure the navigation. So I want us to move ahead, and then we're going to do a new nav. So let me just have some space there, and then we're going to do let's do an ordered list. So we can do a UL, and then within the UL we're going to have the list item, and then the list item we're going to nest a tag, anchor tag, and then we're going to have the first one is going to be let's have the first one to be home, and then we're going to save everything. So I want us to duplicate this list item, should I say list item code, several times. So we're going to duplicate it like around 6 times, that is 5 times. So let's just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're going to change. So after home we have the contact. So after home we have the contact, and then the next one we have about. So we also have about as another list item. Then after about we have the blog as another list item. We have the blog, and then after the blog we have registration. After the blog we have registration, and then after registration we have the courses. We also have the courses. So we are going to save everything, and there we have our list. So we can comment this one out by hitting Control forward slash, and then we are going to remain with our list. So we can remove the bullets using a simple style sheet code, so that we just have uniform list. But in the meantime we're going to leave it there, because the entire goal of this course is to teach about HTML. So we are not going to do anything with HTML. Now we're going to head to the bottom here, and we're going to remove this list because it was for the importance of learning the section only. So I want us to move to the next section of the tutorial, and that is going to be working with tables. HTML gives us the ability to present data in tabular form. So maybe if you have some data that is supposed to be organized in tabular form, you can easily achieve it using the HTML table elements. So I want us to see how we can do that one in our project. So to create a table, we're going to create the table within the body. We're going to first have the table element, and then within the table element, all other elements are arranged in rows. So we're going to first do a first row using a tr element, and then within the table element, within the tr element, we're going to have headings. So tables can have headings, and then we can also have the table data. So let's just do first table headings. So we can have a heading of name, and then we're going to duplicate this thrice. So after name, we're going to have maybe the age, and then maybe we can do something like maybe the sex. So when you save that, you're supposed to get the first row, which is the heading of the table. Then we are going to move to the second row. So we'll have table row, and then within that row we are going to have now the actual data. So for the first data, which matches the first column, we can have maybe Alphonse, and then we can duplicate everything. So after Alphonse, we're going to have the age of Alphonse, maybe 30 years. Then we will have the sex of Alphonse. Of course, Alphonse is a male, so we're going to have a male as the sex. So this is the first row of the table, which is basically the heading, and then the second row of the table is basically the details of the actual data. We can also do another row, last row. So within the last row, we're going to have table data, and then the first data is going to be a person. So we can have maybe Eric, and then we're going to have another data. Another is going to be the age of Eric. So Eric can be 40 years old, 45 years old. Then we can do another table data, and that is going to be the sex of Eric, which is male. Now let's duplicate this. Also, going to have the last data, who is going to be a female. So we're going to have the last data. So we'll call maybe this person, let's call it maybe Getty, and then you can have Getty being 28 years, and then we will have the sex of Getty to be female. So let's have Getty to be female. So when you save everything, you get a table of heading, that is name, age, sex, and then the table data are basically made up of 3 rows. In general, the table has 4 rows. The first row is made up of the heading. The second row is the table data. The third row, table data, and the fourth row is also another table data. Now, tables can also have headings, and headings are given. We represent headings using the table caption. So to introduce a heading, we just have captions, and then we can call it individual. We can have it as individual details as the title of the heading. So you can see we have individual details. Let me just do a break after this div. Let me do a break to the div so that we have that. Now we can also have a special table whereby the table can span through 2 columns. So we can have name that extends up to age. We can have maybe something like particulars, and then it's going to span through from name to the age column. So we'll move to our table, and then in the first row, first heading, we will have it to span. Now when it spans, it means that the last part is going to be pushed. The age is going to be pushed, and the sex. So let's see that in action. So we can have call span. We use an attribute of call span, and then we can give it two columns. So it's going to be span this column or this one, and then it's going to place the name to span through these 2 columns. For this one to work effectively, it means that we're going to reduce the number of columns here. So maybe we will have, let's have this one something like particular. So we can change it to particular. Can have it particular because comprised with the name and the age, and then we will do we will do away with the age, and then we will have the sex. So you can see that particular stretches from the names and also comprises of the years. Of course, our table is not showing border because that is usually achieved using the CSS, and this course is specifically designed for HTML, so we're not going to do anything on CSS. Now next we can also span through rows. So maybe we can have a row that spans through 2 rows, so that we don't have this other element here. So that is very simple. To achieve that, we are going to move to maybe the second row is this one, and then we want it to span down here. So maybe the second row, we can have the first data, so we have row span, then we can also give it to span through 2. So you find that pushes this data away from the wage. Let me just undo that so that you can see. So initially we had the male here, but now when we do a row span, then it pushes that. So to achieve that, we're also going to reduce. We're supposed to comment to the last row. So we'll comment it here, and then you find that everything works perfect. So that is about the row span, the call span, and the table caption. We can also have a table footer. So let's see how we can do a table footer. So to do a table footer, we're just going to go before the last closing tag of table. We'll use the tag that is the tfoot. So we are going to use the tfoot, and then we can call it something like table 1.2, and then we save. So it basically appears at the top of the table. That is to ensure that the table footer is underneath the table. We need to add at least a row. So what we're going to do here, we're going to have at least 1 row, and then within the row we can have the first table data. So the first table data can be maybe something like table 1. Let's just have it table 1.2, and then we can have it to span across, or we can just leave it there to rest on the first column. So I want us to use the information we've learned about tables so that we can create something more appropriate, like maybe we can do a course curriculum. So we are going to do away with the table that we've just worked on, and then we can create our fresh table on the course curriculum. So we'll start by having the table element, and then with the table element, we're going to have the first table row, and then in the first table we're going to have the first table head. So the table head, we are going to have maybe we're going to have the course. We're going to have the course, and then I'm going to duplicate the line thrice. So after the course, we're going to have the duration, and then after the duration, we will do the cost or the amount. Let's just talk about the amount, how much it costs. So that's the first data, and the first data of the row is basically the table head. Now the second row is basically going to be table data. So we'll have the table data, that's the TD, and then the first table data is going to be let me have CSS, and then I'm going to duplicate it twice. So CSS is supposed to take maybe, let's say 21 days, and then we'll have the amount, which be around maybe $100. Let's have the amount to be $100. So I'm going to duplicate this row. So let me just duplicate it thrice. So for this one, we're going to have HTML. We will have the amount to maybe be 14 days, and then the cost maybe to be maybe let's have maybe $90. Then for the last one is going to be JavaScript. The course is JavaScript, and then we will change the days to maybe 30 days, and then we can have the amount to be maybe $12. So we have our table. Something is not working right here. The CSS, JavaScript, and then the HTML is not working right. So let's just correct the typo, and then we can have HTML. Let's have HTML there. So when we save everything, now we should have our table right. That is it. So I want us to move to the next section, and that is going to be multimedia. Alright, so multimedia on the web generally consists of sound, music, videos, movies, and animation. In general, it consists of anything that you can literally see or listen to. So in this section, we are going to see how we can add various multimedia files, that is the video, the audio, and the YouTube videos. To add a multimedia file, we are going to work with this section after the learn digital skills. So we're going to move there, and then we're going to start by adding a video file. To add a video file in your website, it's super simple. We are going to use the video element. So we're just going to type the video element, and then we are going to have a source nested inside the video, and then some text. So let me just have video, the next source, and then we hit tab. So within the source here, we're supposed to have another closing tag of the source. Let's just have another closing tag of the source, and then we can have a video within this source section. So we'll have an attribute that is src, and then we can give a link to where we have a video. Currently I don't have a video within my files, so it's just for illustrative purposes. You can also use the first option when you type the video tag. So when you type the video tag, you get the first embed code, and then from here you can go ahead and add the video. Then down here you can have a text. You can have a text of maybe the title of the video, something of that sort. Now to add audio, it's similar to that format. So we just have an audio tag. Let me just do a lowercase. We'll have an audio tag, and then we can have the source attribute, and then we can go and provide the link. Now we can also have some other attributes such as the controls, and this one allows you to add various controls, like maybe the play, the pause. Like you can see here already we have the play, the pause. So if you have a video, then you're going to have the play, the pause. You can also have another attribute that is the autoplay. That means that the audio file is going to play automatically. Now we can also embed YouTube video, and this is the modern embedding method of files. And when you embed a YouTube file, it doesn't should I say jam up your server, because remember that video files are always of big size. So to do that, just go and open YouTube, and then you can go ahead and search for maybe what you want. So maybe we'll search for prime X scales, and then from prime X scales we can go and choose a video that you want to embed. So maybe you want to embed this first video. We are going to copy, go to share, and then get embed. So this is what we are going to use. So we are going to highlight everything. So let me just get back the process again. So share, and then embed, then we are going to go ahead, click that, and then we are going to copy. So we'll come to the section where we want to embed that, and then we're going to paste it. So when you get back to our website, everything reloads. Now within this, let me just have it in a good view. So within this code, we have this attribute, the width and the height. We can adjust them so that our video fits in our window correctly. So maybe we can have a width maybe 350 pixel, and then we can do a height of maybe 250, so that we can have a video that fits in. Let's do 250 height, 250 height. So if you haven't closed that, let me just close it. So you can have that. So that is how we embed YouTube videos, audios, and video within our files. So in the next section, I want us to move ahead super fast and look at forms. The next thing that we're supposed to look at is HTML forms. Now, HTML forms give us the capability to have forms that we can use to collect user input data for processing on the server side. So we're going to create a simple form that we're going to use to discuss how the form elements work. So within our HTML code that is on the index.html file, we're going to start by creating a form. And to create a form, we're first going to start by having the form elements. Now the form elements comes with the first attribute, that is the action. So the attribute can either get a value of get or post. So this one depends on the security of the data that we want to send through the server to process it. For sensitive data we use post, and for insensitive data we use get. So that is is an advanced case, especially when you're working with the PHP or any server processing language. Now, inside the form element, we have some other elements. The first element is what we call the label. So we can have a form that has a label for name, and then a text box for name, a label for last name, and a text box for last name. So we do a label, and then the label comes with an attribute of for, and the for is used to bind. It's usually used to bind the form with the to bind the label with the text box. So we will have, let me just like maybe first name as the label, and then for as the label text, and then for we can have something like maybe f name. So let's give it f name, and then we will move to the next element of the form, and that is going to be now the input. So inputs can either be text, can either be password, it can either be a button or whichever. So this one is going to be a text, and then we're going to give it an ID to bind it with the label. So we can give it an ID, and the ID must match the for attribute in the label. So we'll call it f name, and then we will add another attribute which is very important, and that is the attribute for the name of the input. So we'll give it a name that is going to match the type of data that we are requesting from the user. So the type of data we're requesting is f name, because when the form is submitted to the server, then it's going to have a name value pair. So it's going to be the f name and then the value that is submitted. So we are going to comment some codes here so that we can have a clear view of the form, or we can just we can have the form, we work with the form on the contact page that we created. So I'm going to cut everything here, and then I'm going to move to the contact.html, and then below the h1 we can paste it, and then we can see. So we're going to open this one with live server. So we just proceed, right click, and then we go to open with the live server so that we can have it. So this is our first, this is the label, the first name is the label, and then this is the input for the first name. Now we can also have another label for maybe the last name. So let's have the label for L name, and then we are going to give it the label text, and that is going to be last name. And then we can do an input for last name. So we have an input element, it is for text as well, and then we'll give it an ID that binds it with the label. So the ID is going to be the same as that of the label, that is the L name, and then we will have the name attribute as well, and it's going to be the L name as well. So what we mean by binding, it means that when you click on either the text, that is the label, or the text box, then the cursor starts blinking there. So we're going to have some break of line so that we can have the last name label to move to the next line. So next to this input, we're going to have a break of line, and then you can have something there. So maybe you can do 2 breaks, and then we have some space there. So that is a simple form that we can start with. And then we can also have an input of a button, that's a submit button. We do an input, and then this input is going to be type submit, and we are going to use it to submit the form details. Then we need to give it another attribute, and that's going to be the value, so that the button can appear. So we can call it the submit, or we can give it an attribute of send. So we are going to have a line break here so that we can have the button beneath the form. So this is a simple form. We can be a little advanced and do something more fancy of the form. So I want us to go a little advanced so that we can have an advanced sort of form that might include maybe some radio buttons that you can click on. So still on the same form, we are going to have some other input. So another input we can be radio. So we'll have an input type, and then we'll give it radio, and then I will give it an ID, So the ID is going to match whatever the label that we're going to have for the radio. So the ID will be maybe, let's talk of maybe male, and then or let's lose the languages that we're learning. So let's talk of HTML, and then we will have another attribute, and the attribute is going to be the name. So the radio button comes from another attribute, and after we go to the next, we can talk about maybe favorite language. So we can talk about the fav language, favorite language as the name attribute. Then the value that is supposed to be submitted when one clicks on the radio button we will have let's have the value to be HTML. So the value is going to be HTML. Now we are going to give it a label. We will give it a label. So let's have the label to the for attribute. We're going to use the for attribute to bind the label with the ID of the input. So it's HTML, and then we can go ahead and add the label text. So the label text will be HTML, and then we can do a break. We can do a line break. That is, so we can do a line break. Let's do a line break. We'll do 2, and then we save. So you can see that we have a radio button here. Now, radio buttons works on the principle that you cannot click more than one radio button at the same time. You only need to click on one, and that is why we have the name to be fav language, the favorite language. So the name is going to cut across so that you can only choose on one. So let's duplicate. We are going to duplicate this line of input of input radio. So let's duplicate it 2 times. We can have 3 radio buttons. So let's say, and we can have something like that. So we are going to change. We are going to make some changes. So for the second one, we can have an ID of maybe CSS, and then the value that is submitted is going to be CSS, and then for the label, it's going to be CSS to bind it with that input, and then the label text will be CSS. And then for the next one, we will have an ID of JavaScript. Let's have an ID of JavaScript, and then we will have the value to be JavaScript as well. And then we can have the label text to be JavaScript. So when you save everything, then you will have your form to appear like this. So you can only choose on one radio button because they're tied up together. That is why we have the name fav language cutting across all the radio buttons. So that is why we have that. That is why we have that cutting across all the radio buttons. So we can move a step further so that we can make our form more fancy. So we can also include check boxes. So just within the form, we can go ahead and have some check boxes. So for the checkbox, we'll start by having maybe an input. So we'll have an input, and then we'll give it the name checkbox, and then we'll give it an ID of maybe vehicle 1. Let's call it vehicle 1. Vehicle 1, and then we can have the name that is we're going to use to bind it with the label. So we can also have the name to be vehicle 1, and then we will proceed to the value that is submitted when somebody clicks on the checkbox. So the value will be bike, and then we can have the label. So let's have the label, and then the label is going to be for. So the for should be the same as the ID. So it's going to be the vehicle 1, and then we can have another text for the label, and the text for the label is I have a bike. So these are texts that ask somebody maybe if you have a bike. So we can do a break. Line break, so that we can have some space between the checkbox and the submit button. So we're going to duplicate these ones. Let's duplicate it maybe twice. So let's duplicate it twice. So for the next input is going to be checkbox, and you can have vehicle 2, and then the name is going to be vehicle 2, and then the value is going to be a car. So let's have the value to be a car, and then we can have I have a car. So I have a car, and then the for is going to be vehicle 2, and then we save. So I have a car, so you can check on that. You can as well check on that or check on that. So let's also make changes to the last one. The last one is going to be vehicle 3. Sorry, vehicle 3, and then it's going. The name is going to be vehicle 3. And then this one is going to be maybe I have a boat. So let's be boat. Let's have it as boat, and then the for is going to be vehicle 3. And then we'll have the text here to be about. Text be about. So the checkbox works under the principle of the fact that you can select as many as possible. That is opposed to the radio buttons, which works on the principle that you can only select one at a time. Now let's proceed and make our form a little fancier. So we can also add, maybe I say that the action attribute of the form is basically a file which is going to handle all these inputs that we have on the form. So once you have maybe some back-end code that can process your form, then you can go ahead and add that code. Now there are also some things that you can do within the form. Under the form, we can also have other attributes, like maybe the target. So the target basically applies whether you want the form to open a new window, or maybe to just maintain the same page. So we can have a target attribute, and the target can either be blank, parent, self, or top, just like when we're looking at the link, when we were linking. So you can either have the form open on a new tab, or the same tab. Now we can also have another attribute, and that can be autocomplete. The autocomplete. So the autocomplete can either be on and off. It takes two values. So when it is on, it means that the form is going to give you suggestions depending on the previous input data that was fed on the form. So when you have a data like that, and then maybe you come and then you clean up everything. Now when you try to do that again, then it's supposed to give you autocomplete depending on the previous data that you had. So that is another important attribute that you can have on our form. Now there's also the no validate attribute, which is a Boolean value. So we can also have no validate attribute. It doesn't have a value, so it means that the form is not going to be validated. Now it's not a strong method of validating a form, but it's just a basic method of validating a form. Otherwise, if we want to have a strong method of validating a form, then we can go ahead and use we can use stuff like maybe the JavaScript or the PHP to validate a form. Now I also want us to add another form attribute, not attribute really, but form element, and that can be a drop down to allow us to select from an array of maybe some option or a group of options, and that is the select element. So we can have maybe a label. Let's have another label. So we can do a label, and then you'll have label for cars. Let's give it the name label for cars, and then the label text could be label for cars, and then the label text could be choose a car. And then for the first one, we're going to the next element that follow is going to be a select. Then we can have the first option. When you select, we have the name, so the name is going to bind it to the label. So we'll have cars, and then the ID should be similar to that. Actually, the ID that binds it to the label, and the name is what is sent to the server, so the server can easily identify where it has come from, or rather which input has come from. So we'll have the ID of cars, and then the next thing that follows is supposed to be now the option that you're supposed to select from. So we'll have the first option. So the first option has a value of maybe Volvo. Then the text that the users will see there will be Volvo. And then we are going to duplicate this line of code 3 times so that you can have 3 selections. Let's do that. So the next one will maybe be, let's have Toyota. And then the value will be Toyota. The value will be Toyota. Let's have Toyota. And then we can have another one can be Audi. We can do Audi. Sorry, let's do Audi. Then the option text will be just the same as the value inside there. Then we can do Fiat. We can do Fiat. Then on the value also we'll have the same, that is the Fiat. That's the value there. So all these options are supposed to be within the select elements or the select tags. So we're going to cut them, Control X, and then we'll insert them in between there. Sorry, let's just paste them, Control V. Undo everything, Control X, and then we paste them there, Control V, and then we save everything for uniform formatting. So when you go to your form, you can see that we have the choose car, and the choose car gives you options to select from here. So maybe for the label, we can do a break, line break, so that we have some space. Choose a car, and then beneath here we can also have some break. Let's do some line break so that we have the button gives some space. So we can have various options to choose from depending on our preference. So what I'd like to do, let me remove this line break here, and then instead you can have a colon so that it sits next to the choose car. Now that is another important form element, that is a select, which allow us to select from a range of options. Now the next form element is going to be a text area, which can be a very big text area down here. So the text area element defines a multi-line input field, which is basically a text area. So we can define it using attributes such as the name, the rows, and the values. Let's see that, how we achieve that. So we will have maybe the text area. So to introduce a text area, we'll use the text area elements. So do text area elements, and then the name, we can maybe give it the name of message, and then the ID, we can give it an ID of message. Let's just give it ID of message, and then we can define the number of rows. How many rows do we want it to be? So we can have rows maybe 10, and then we can also have the columns, the calls, basically the calls. The calls can be 30. Now inside the text area, we can have some text. Maybe we can say something like type your message, type your message. So when you save it, it is what basically appears within the text area box. So let's just do a break. Let's have these ones move to the far end, and then you can have that there. So we'll do a line break maybe twice, and then when you save, we can have the submit button down there. So the rows and the columns are basically used to specify the number of visible lines in the text area, and the columns will specify the width, while the rows specify the visible number of lines on the text area. Now we can also change this input, the button. We can use another element to have a button, and that is using the button element. So instead of this one, let me just comment it out. So we can have currently we don't have a button now, so we can just use the button element. So we'll do a button, and then the button will give you maybe we'll have the type, and then we'll give it the type to be a button. So there's a button. We can also have the button text here, which might say send submit details. Let's click off submit details, submit details. So when you save it, we have, let me just undo that. Submit details, sorry, submit details. So when you save that, we have that buttons that says that submit details. So we can either use the input type button, or we can just have the button type button and the button text, that is the input text. Now there's also something important we can do with our forms. We can add something known as the field set. So the field set element is used to basically group related data. So we use it to group related data. Maybe we want to have all this data grouped together up to the submit button. So we'll have all this information nested inside a field set. So what we'll do here, just immediately after the form or opening form tag, we will have a field set, and then inside the field set we will cut everything. So let's cut everything, including the button, and then we nest it inside there. So it paste, and then we save so that everything form accurately. So you can see that we have some outline that groups everything and puts them together, and that is what the field sets do. So that is how we work with the form. So forms allow us to submit user data to server side for processing, and it's also very, very important when maybe you are collecting very important information from the user. So I've mentioned something under the action attribute. It can either take the value of get or the post. So it depends with the type of data. If you are sending sensitive data, then it is advisable that you use the post. And then if you are sending sorry, it's not the action attribute, but it's the method attribute. So we need to have a method attribute, and the method attribute usually take either you can either give it the get, or you can give it the post. The action is basically maybe the file that is supposed to process all this information. Maybe if it is a PHP, or maybe it is a JavaScript, it's maybe some Node.js file. It depends with the backend language that we're using. So that one marks the end of this section. I want us to move to the next section shortly, and that will be the HTML semantic tags. You're supposed to understand what are semantic elements. Semantic element usually describes its meaning both to the browser and to the developer. In other words, semantic elements help us structure our content in a website professionally. So there are elements that doesn't have any meaning to the browser or to the developer. For example, I want us to head over to the index.html. We can have an element like the div element. So the div element is not making any sense to the browser or to the developer. Now we can make elements have meaning to the browser or to the developer by using what we call the semantic tags. Examples of semantic tags include, we have several. We have things like maybe the header, there's semantic elements. We also have the main, the semantic elements. We can also have stuff like the article. We can have article, the semantic element. We can also have section. We can also have the nav, semantic element. We can also have the footer. So these elements, they have meaning to the user and as well to the developer as well as the browser. For example, the header is used to describe the heading of a website, and the heading of the website is where we have the nav. That is where we also get the logo. We also have the main. This basically represent the main content of a web page, where we have the main content. We can also have an article. We can have sections within the main. We can have maybe section. This can be a section for the hero section. Then we can have maybe the gallery section. We can have the contact section, and then we also have a nav. Nav resides within the header section. Then last we can have the footer, which usually resides at the bottom of the page. So we can use these semantic tags to reorganize our page and make it look more professional and orderly. So first we're going to move to the topmost part, and then we're going to have the first semantic tag, and that is going to be the header. So within the header, we will have another semantic tag nested that is going to be the nav bar. And then within the nav, you're going to have our ordered list, which is basically the links. So that is what we have there. And then we are also going to have okay, I've copied I was supposed to cut everything. Let me just cut everything so that we can have them inside the nav there. Now we can also have another semantic tag for the body, for the main content. So for the main content, we just have something like the main, and then we are going to cut the main content and nest it inside the main semantic element. So let's just cut everything here, and then we can pull it inside the main, and then we save. So within the main, we can divide it further so that we can have maybe section. So we can have the hero section, this section where we have the LAN and the where we have the H2 and the video. So this one can be let's have that one can be a section, so we'll cut it. Sorry, let me just cut it clearly. Let me cut it, and then we can have something like maybe section, and then we can give it a div of maybe the hero, or you can just nest everything inside, and then we can give it maybe an ID of a hero or a class of a hero. Maybe we can give it a class, and then we can call it the hero section of the website. Then we can have another section. So let's move ahead, and then we nest everything in the section. So let's have actually there's a problem here. This body was supposed to be at the bottom part, so I didn't paste everything correctly. So let me just have the body there, and then we'll have whatever that remains to be in the next section. So we'll cut everything here, including the tables. Then we can have another section, and then we can give it a class of maybe gallery. Let's give it a class of gallery, and then we will have everything nested inside that section. And then lastly, we can also do maybe a footer. We can do a footer, and then within the footer we can have some paragraph, and then the paragraph can maybe be copyright. So to do a copyright, we're going to use special characters. So we talk of the amper, and then we do copy semicolon, and then we'll have something like maybe copyright, let's talk of 2026, and then we can have something like maybe learning academy. So when you save it, you can have a footer at the bottom of the page there. So that is what we use semantic elements to achieve. We use it to structure our page professionally so that the page can be meaningful to both the developer and the browser. So examples of semantic tags include things like the header, the nav, the section, the article, the main, the footer, among others. So in the next section, I want us to wind up and look at the last section of the tutorial, and that is going to be the metadata and the head. I want us to wind this tutorial by looking at the metadata and the head section of an HTML website. So for any given HTML website, there's always the head section, and the head section is basically for the metadata. Metadata is basically data about data, that is data about the HTML document that we are working on. So the metadata is basically not displayed on the page, or rather it is usually important when it comes to browser and search engine and so forth. So within the head, that is where we have the metadata, and the first metadata that we have is the character set. So this one shows that we are using the standard HTML5 character set, and that is the UTF-8. The second metadata is for responsiveness, and it is for mobile responsiveness. That is, we can also add some other metadata. We can have metadata for search engines. For example, let me just paste one, so we can have a metadata for search engine like that one. So this one shows that our page is basically about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We can also have a metadata to refresh the page maybe after some time, and I'll link it. I'll paste the code. So this one shows that the HTML page will be linked after every 30 seconds. It's supposed to refresh after every 30 seconds. We can also have a metadata for maybe the author of the page. So we can have a metadata to show that maybe the author of the page is let's have maybe somebody let's have like maybe prime X skills. So that shows that the author of the page is prime X skill. We can also have some other important metadata that we can link to our page, and some of the stuff that we can add within the head section include things like maybe external style sheet. So we can come below the title, and then we can do a link, and then we can connect to maybe our external style sheet if at all we have maybe some style sheet, that is. So the head section is very important, but it's not usually displayed to the page. And anything that relates to the metadata, linking to external fonts, external style sheets, or maybe linking to maybe, should I say, font awesome, icons, among others, we always do it within the head section. Now the question comes, how do we link? Maybe if you have an external JavaScript file. Now JavaScript file might be very bulky and it will take a lot of time to load. So it is advisable that you link your JavaScript file below the body section, and you just use the script tag to link it, and then within the script tag you'll have the src to connect to the source. That is the link where you access it. So this one summarizes everything, and this one marks the end of the tutorial on HTML beginner to professional.